The parable of a man and his two sons, most often referred to as the parable of the prodigal son, is unique to Luke and is the culmination of a series of 3 parables in Luke that celebrate the joy of finding that which was lost. One day, when Jesus saw some Pharisees frowning and muttering about how he ought not to be so accepting of sinners, Jesus told them some stories. Jesus warmed them up with a story of a shepherd who never gives up looking for that one lost sheep until he is found. Next, Jesus tells the story of a woman who never gives up looking for a missing coin until she finds it. At the end of both of these parables, there is great joy and a celebration. Jesus then brings the point home with a tale of lost children and a parent who never gives up on them. God is like the Father who never stops waiting for the wayward one to come home, who in fact ran to meet him while he was still far away. This Father brushes aside his Son's confession so eagerly to lavish his love on his Son and get the party going. God's joy is like that each and every time someone turns to God. Before we go farther into the parable, I think we should first understand what prodigal means. It has 3 definitions. First, characterized by profuse and wasteful expenditure. Second, recklessly spendthrift. And third, yielding abundantly. Now, with those definitions in mind, let us continue on. Now, if you are like I am, it is often difficult for us to see something new in the parable of the prodigal son. We have heard the story so many times, we believe that we have squeezed it dry of its meaning. Not only that, but as the saying goes, familiarity breeds contempt. When we hear the opening words of the parable once again, and there was a father who had 2 sons, we might be tempted to greet the words with, ho-hum, heard that, I know what it's about, let's move on. Well, I invite you to not go there so fast this morning. Taking the definitions I mentioned earlier into account, let us ask the question, who is or who are the prodigals in this story? Also, I have often wondered if the parable of the prodigal son is the best name. One more apt title might be the parable of the loving father. Now, recall the first definition, if you will, characterized by profuse and wasteful expenditure. Now, there's a pretty obvious characterization here, isn't there? The young son asks for his inheritance and goes to a foreign land and squanders all that his father gives him. So that's an easy one. How about the second definition? One who was recklessly spendthrift. This might be a little more of a stretch, if you will. So, when the younger son returns home, the older son is angry, mad, unwilling to welcome his younger brother back, unwilling to forgive his sibling for his actions, unwilling to enter the celebration. And I think the question is, what happened here? How did the older son come to the conclusion that his father didn't appreciate him? And even worse, didn't love him? What put that venom in his soul when he shouts, all these years I have been working like a slave for you, like a slave, and I never disobeyed you. I never gave you 1 minute's trouble. And what have you given me? Not so much as a goat for me to have a feast with my friends. What has happened to this faithful brother, this faithful son? The older son can't rejoice at his brother's homecoming. And I doubt that he's done much rejoicing in a long, long time. Somewhere along the way, a faithful life became a duty. What happened to the joy? Somewhere along the way, this faithful son got the idea that love can be counted and earned the way money is counted and earned. With that outlook, is it any wonder he can't understand his father's grace to one who doesn't deserve it? Here this good man is, this good son, after a lifetime of doing the right thing, yet he's still miles and miles away from his father in his heart, lost even though he is physically at home. We now return to the third definition of prodigal, yielding abundantly. Isn't that exactly what the Father is doing in this parable? Giving away his love abundantly to his Son. The deeper truth of the story of the prodigal son lies in coming to grips with the breadth and depth of God's love. The breadth of God's embrace is unknowable to us. The depth of God's love is incomprehensible and certainly immeasurable from a human point of view. It is not for us to decide who falls within God's grace. During this time of Lent, when we are preparing ourselves spiritually for reliving the story of Jesus' passion, his death, and resurrection, we should keep Paul's words from this morning clearly in focus, that through Jesus' one amazing act of sacrificial love, God was reconciling the world to himself. And not just reconciling our one self-selected flock of faithful believers gathered in any one place at any one time, but the entire world. There is a story of a 5th grade teacher who held what she called the Scholastic Olympics every year. And she would ask each child to pick a sentence from literature, name the author and the source from which it came, and explain why the sentence was the most important sentence ever written. And you can guess some of the entries, I'm sure. 77 years ago, all people are created equal, to be or not to be. And there were 14 entries of the same biblical verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You know what sentence won? It was not written by a famous author at all. It wasn't to be found in any literary source. It appeared on a postcard from Hawaii that one of the 5th grade girls received from her stepfather, who was on a honeymoon with the girl's mother. And the teacher was a little uneasy about letting the girl speak, but she did, and the girl shared that until she received that postcard, she had no idea how her stepfather felt about her. The girl's entry won the prize. It was written on the back of a postcard from Waikiki, and it simply said, "Charlotte, I love you." That's the greatest sentence ever written. And there are very many variations of it. And wherever it is heard, and from whatever source it comes, it is a blessing. It is in the text this morning. It is in the parable, and it is addressed to everyone, to sons and to daughters, to prodigals and to the righteous. Come home. I love you. So the next time you encounter this parable, wherever it may be, in scripture, in literature, in art, or at the movies, remember that all the characters are prodigals. That we are all prodigals in one way or another. And that God's love for us is never ending, with no boundaries. And that God's reconciling love demands nothing except total surrender to God's mercy. And God says to each of us, "Come home. I love you."